Today on the show we have Patrice Bowman. She is the owner and operator of Bowman Pictures LLC and also a dailies tech at Harbor Picture Company. Patrice, thank you for joining us on the show today. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing all right. Thank you for having me, Kristen.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in film?
Sure. So I started watching old movies on the Turner Classic Movies channel as a kid. And one of the movies that I saw that really inspired me was Lawrence of Arabia. It's like a classic, war epic. And in that movie, I saw a lot of potential that film had in terms of like visual impact and, great character development and a compelling story. So I started watching a whole bunch of old movies growing up, reading film reviews and film criticism. And eventually, when I started attending college, I majored in film studies, concentrating in production. And at that point, I was studying film criticism and film theory, but also making my own short films in college. And ultimately, as a senior, I was able to write, direct, and produce, and also do the editing for my senior thesis film, Lean on Him, that was that screened like several festivals, won an award, and from that's why I just thought I should continue with filmmaking.
What award did you win?
It was the Howard Lamar Prize at my college. It's an award they give out to exceptional thesis projects.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
And you went to Yale?
Yes, I did.
So as a Midwest person, you're from Ohio, right?
Yes, I am.
So fellow Midwest person, you moved all the way to Yale to go to film school. What was that like for you?
Yeah, moving to New Haven to attend Yale University, it was definitely different because I hadn't really like been to like that region of the United States before. So it was a little bit intimidating being like in this school that had this great reputation and just being in a new environment, sort of living not exactly by yourself because you're obviously living with other students, but away from family. All that took some getting used to,
Hmm.
but after a while, it was just something that I adjusted to. I was able to, you know, get great friends and do a lot of cool activities on campus, and learn a lot, and sort of figure out what I wanted to do with my life after college. Overall, it was a great experience.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us something about maybe film theory or film analysis that somebody who maybe hasn't gone to school yet for film or doesn't plan on going to school yet, something that you learned that maybe most people don't know about that?
In terms of film
Like
theory,
film theory or film analysis, like what did you learn that really stuck with you?
I think of a lot of the classes that I took, there were just so many, so I'll have to try
Sure,
to boil
yeah.
it down. But I think overall, it was probably like a couple of things, like sort of learning about the film history of like different countries, like Germany and Japan, because I took some international film classes, and sort of learning how the history of their countries impacted their filmmakers and their cinema. Uh, that sort of helps you think about how the history of the United States has sort of impacted its own filmmaking and its own filmmakers, just in terms of like certain genres, like for instance, in the United States, learning about the Western as a genre and how it came to be and how it's been deconstructed, things like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's like sort of one part of what I learned as a film studies major, and also just learning about how film theory helps construct certain world views and certain ideas of people. I mean, probably one of the most famous examples of learning about film theory would probably be the male gaze, sort of learning how films have impacted how people view like women on film. There's also, race in cinema, which is something that I kind of specialized in, specifically learning how the depictions of people of color on film have sort of impacted how people see those people, and how certain filmmakers have used cinema as a tool to combat stereotypes. So I would say that that's kind of an overview of film theory. There are so many theorists that have taken different approaches to studying cinema, but the ones that I concentrated in was how film uh, views like, people of like a different gender or like a different race, and how people have sort of supported those stereotypes and also challenged those stereotypes through filmmaking.
Hmm. So we're in kind of a unique point in history right now with the whole COVID-19 thing, huh? And I know we
Yeah.
don't really have our ability to see into the future, but how do you think that all of this will affect maybe the next 10 years of filmmaking?
Well, from what I've been reading, it seems like at least immediately there's going to have to be a lot more emphasis on making like certain parts of the workflow remote. I know for post production, it's a lot easier to make that remote than just, people have to go out into the field and film things. In terms of the impact, there's so many different aspects it's probably going to affect, but I feel like it's definitely going to affect the film going experience, I should say, in terms of, you know, the whole idea of going into a dark theater and watching a film, whether it's like in a movie theater chain like AMC, or like a film festival, that's definitely going to be impacted. I don't think that kind of experience we can really get to as easily again. I think there's going to be this weird thing where, like, maybe some festivals will do it at a decreased capacity, so
Mm.
less people will be attending, as people are still getting over the fear of how COVID-19 spreads. And then for some places, I guess it's going to be permanently online, which definitely makes certain festivals accessible. Like, for instance, South by Southwest has a lot of short films online, and they're also working with Amazon to put some features online as well.
Mhm.
So, for someone who can like travel all the way out there, that's definitely cool. You can see, all these great pieces of work, but it definitely impacts the community aspect of filmmaking, or the film going experience, I should say.
Yeah, yeah.
And in terms of how it impacts filmmaking, I feel like there might be an emphasis on getting less people to kind of do the same amount of work on set, because it's like if you can't have all these people, together in close proximity, then you have to have less people working on, television content, features, music videos, whatever it may be. And that definitely sounds like that would probably be a little bit more stressful than it already is,
Uh-huh.
because less people have to deal with like the same amount of work, if not more. But these are just assumptions.
That reminds me a lot of the change from celluloid, post-production celluloid cutting
Oh
to
yeah,
digital. Now it's like digital to remote. Or well,
yeah,
some people have to be on set. So instead of maybe in post-production people having to take on more, maybe it's the production people that will wind up having to take on more. That's interesting. So, what are some of the things that happened in your career after college that really influenced the filmmaker that you've become?
well, one thing was that I started working in a documentary space after college. I worked at Vice for a while as a finishing assistant editor, and that sort of continued to help me build my skill set in post production, but also learning about the things that go into making content.
Mhm.
And, working there, I sort of realized that as much as I liked doing post-production, I still wanted to be able to, contribute and like tell my own stories, because
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff that I was working on was, it's journalism, so it can be kind of depressing at times. So I thought, well, maybe I could, continue to work on stories that might be a little bit happier. That's sort of how I came up with my short film Saturday Grace, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. Of course, I'm working on other short film scripts right now, and they're not as happy. But I think for that time, I was very devoted to the idea of making something positive that wasn't depressing or didn't have to do with like war or like things like that.
Yeah, finding some balance for your own self, right? What
Yeah.
does for somebody who might know what or might not know, what are the duties that go to a finishing assistant?
Yes. So working as a finishing assistant editor, I'm sure it can vary a little bit from place to place, but when I was doing that advice for the weekly HBO show, it consisted of taking the offline material from the editor. Like once the edit was locked, no more editing, no more changes, everyone signs off. Then you have to start the online process. And that means you take the proxies or the low resolution media that the editor was working with, and you relink it to the original media that was probably like 2K or 4K or something like that. And you prepare that edit sequence for both the colorist and also the sound mixer. So you have like the two people preparing it, the footage to be the best that it can be, visually and audio wise, preparing it for broadcast on HBO.
Hmm.
So I was responsible for working with those two people, putting in graphics, whether it's like lower thirds, blurring people's faces for privacy reasons, things like that. And I also had to deliver it to the network. And this was on a weekly basis. So it was like every Friday I was delivering to the network.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you for that.
of
Um,
course.
let's see. I remember one time I was delivering something to a network and they had like this, it was almost like a hidden website, right? So they have their URL and then there's, because they don't want anybody to submit their stuff to them. It was a very interesting experience.
Oh, yes, it's a lot of security with that.
Yeah. Okay. With Saturday Grace, what inspired you to make that film?
So there were a couple of things. One, I just wanted to create something that was, positive and inspiring, because I've been working on so many projects that were, I mean, they were obviously well crafted and had very compelling stories and characters, but they were usually kind of depressing. So I wanted to work on something that was just a change of pace. And I also wanted to explore the idea of two people from two different worlds realizing that they had something in common through dance. So that was something that popped up in my head that I want to develop more. I was also someone who grew up uh, with like seeing worship dancing in church. It's a very beautiful like form of dance, and I always wanted to show that on screen and sort of express the beauty of that, and then sort of contrast that kind of expression with Broadway dancing, because the two characters in the film, one is a woman who lost her husband and she's kind of withdrawn from the church. She's a worship dancer. And then there's another woman who's homeless, an ex-Broadway dancer. They have their two different styles and obviously two different lives, but they both find that this art form keeps them alive. So that was supposed to be the way that they bond. And I would also say the last reason why I really wanted to make it was it had been a while since I created my own short film. Like the last short film I made was Lean on Him as my senior thesis film, and that was in 2015.
Hmm.
And so a couple of years had passed, and I realized that I if I wanted to continue to grow as a filmmaker, I had to create something of my own again. So that's why I started writing and developing Saturday Grace, and eventually filmed it in 2018.
Mhm, mhm. And so you're also obviously doing Bowman Pictures at the same time, right?
Yeah, 2018, I'm working as an editor and colorist through Bowman Pictures. Also, at that time, I'm transitioning from Vice to working at Harbor Picture Company. So I was juggling a lot of things
Yeah.
at that moment.
Yeah, how did you find a way to balance all that?
I mean, that's a pretty good question. I think I was just so honestly, I think I was just working a lot, and I just really, really wanted to do something that could take my mind off of other things that I was doing. I don't know if I exactly balanced it because I was still working a full-time job, plus I was freelancing, plus I was developing my own short film. I think the only thing I really could do was probably not do as much freelancing at the time,
Mhm.
but it was definitely I wasn't sleeping as much during that period.
Uh-huh. Well, so let's talk a little bit about that because you mentioned you transitioned from Vice to sorry, I keep forgetting the name of this company to Harbor Picture Company, right? And you're also freelancing. I feel like so many people think, well, you're either a freelancer or you're somebody who's working in the industry. Like, what
Right.
what led you to choose to do both? Was it a choice or is it kind of like a necessity?
So I decided that I wanted to do both a full-time job and freelancing because I wanted a combination of stability and creative freedom.
Mm,
So, at Harbor, I had, great workspace, great people. I was learning a lot of, the technical details, and it is a full-time staff job, so that was great. And I also wanted to continue to work on a lot of like cool, sort of low budget indie stuff that I might not have been able to like work on at my full time job, but at least not in a leading capacity.
mhm.
So I wanted to continue to edit and color grade music videos and short films, things like that. So I found that if I wanted to have something that was both stable, but also I want to continue to develop, my skill set in editing and color grading, I kind of had to balance both. I also just wanted to continue to like build myself up as, a filmmaker, and as I guess in this day and age, you have to be a brand, I suppose.
Yeah, isn't that weird that we have to be not only a person and an artist, but a brand and maybe a company too, right? All in like
Yeah.
one person.
Yes, it is extremely weird. Like, I'm not someone who is an expert at social media, so doing this whole like branding thing, but you're a company and you're an entrepreneur, but you're a filmmaker and you're working a full-time job. It's definitely something that I've continued to learn about and how to be better at it by just through experience and also through seeking advice from other people. But it is, like you said, definitely a weird thing to be all of those things. But I suppose you sort of have to be in this day and age.
Mhm, mhm. And be part of like a community of people doing the same thing, right?
Yes, there definitely is. It's like I feel like a lot of the people that I work with are juggling all those aspects.
Mhm. What is maybe your favorite place to meet new people, to connect with people who are doing the same thing as you?
Well, I would say the number one thing is just, obviously during meetups. Like, I'm a member of Film Shop, which is a filmmaking group that you have to become a member of. It's very supportive, filled with like really cool people doing very creative things. They were actually the group through which I was able to make my short film Saturday Grace, and I was able to work with some people in that group to make that happen. So that was like my number one way to connect with new filmmakers, obviously in person, but sometimes if your hours don't exactly line up with when those meetings happen, the next best thing is, I suppose, like Facebook. I'm a part of a couple of filmmaking groups on Facebook, and usually through that, I see, people asking for advice or like wanting to talk with other filmmakers. I know recently there's been a lot of uh, like Zoom meetups and also panels where people can discuss different topics like marketing or specific career things like working with a casting director. Um, so I've found that to also be a great resource as well. But of course, I absolutely love meeting and talking with people in person.
Which is something we can't do a lot of right now, but
Yeah, of course.
hopefully soon we'll be able to get out of our pads and meet people face to face. Um,
Hmm.
so other than maybe this isolation zone that we're in right now, what are some of the things that have been maybe the biggest challenges for you in starting your company or running your business or finding a job? What's been the point of possible failure that you avoided or maybe somebody else will need to avoid?
Um, Failure. I, I mean, I guess some challenges when I was starting out was just the the initial cost of setting up an LLC. It can be a little bit daunting because you have to deal with paperwork of establishing it, and then there are the rules of having to publish it in a newspaper for a certain amount of time, and then setting up a website, and you have to keep track of all that and sort of submit paperwork on time, uh, just to make sure that you are actually an established limited liability corporation.
Mhm.
So that was one thing. I would probably also say, just like I said before, just juggling everything. It can be a very, like, if you don't manage your time correctly, if you don't schedule things for yourself, if you don't hold yourself accountable, or at least like have people that you are friends with or trust hold you accountable, then you can lose a lot of time that way and find that you're just sort of drowning in work and you're not really making a lot of progress, or you just feel stressed all the time. That's definitely one challenge.
I want to bring something up, and I'm not exactly sure how to do it because I feel like when it comes to like the issue of women in media, that's something like I knew absolutely like we have to talk about this. I'm a woman, you're a
Sure.
woman. Like let's have this conversation. We hardly ever see each other in the workroom, but
Hmm.
Patrice, with you on the show, I think. No, I mean, I have had other women of color on the show, but I don't believe in a series of 23 guests, you were my first African American guest. So, can you maybe speak to the experience of what it is like for African American women working in the industry in post production?
Sure, I could definitely speak about I'm sure it can vary from person to person. For me, I've been so far pretty good, or pretty lucky and blessed, in terms of working with people that obviously respect me and want me to succeed in the industry. I can't say like every single person I've worked with has been nice. I mean, there's definitely been some people who, I don't know, they weren't exactly the best. But in my like last two positions, I mean, this current one and my past one at Vice, it's overall been pretty decent in terms of just working with people that I get along with. They're open to me asking questions and wanting to continue to develop myself professionally. Um, it of course is like always a little bit weird to enter a space and not see a lot of people that look like you, um, or if they do, they're not exactly like doing your job, but like they might be like doing something else, or you don't get to talk with them a lot. Um, it's definitely it's definitely something that I would like to see obviously improve in terms of
Mhm.
like just seeing more like women of color entering post production and you know
Mhm.
connecting with other people. I mean, I've been fortunate to like have connected with other women of color who are doing post production, and they give great advice, and they're very talented and very inspiring. I haven't seen it as much as like in all the places I've worked at, but I can't really say that I've had any horror stories just yet. Like I said, definitely some people that haven't been pleasant to work with, but overall, I would say that it's something that needs to improve.
Yeah.
But I've been blessed enough to not have anything too terrible.
For sure. What is something that maybe we as a generation can do to encourage more women of color to be involved in the industry? Not that they necessarily even need encouragement. Maybe they just need to be given the opportunity. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, yeah. In terms of probably like opportunity, I would say working in this industry, it's a lot of it depends on just like lining up with the right people. I would say that like having more spaces that have people who are very like open to diversifying where they work, that's obviously like a huge leap because one of the initial ways that you can obviously like stop someone who looks like me from working in a space is just like if it's hostile. So like one of the first steps is to make sure that a post-production space for like a TV show or a film is like filled with people who obviously aren't just talented because there's a lot of talented people in this industry, but who also have like a track record of just being like a decent human being. I think it can be I think sometimes, not just in the film industry, but in general, people will focus on, it's very easy to focus on talent and sort of give people a pass for bad behavior. But one of the first things you can do is like just recruit like more and more people who are just like good. I mean, that's a little bit bland, but just like people who have a proven record of not just being talented, but of like actually being like decent human beings.
yeah.
So that would be like step one. And then obviously step two, just more, especially like in the high school and college level, there's obviously classes, for post production. It can be a little bit cost prohibitive because, you obviously have like fees and things like that. But I would say like having more and more free resources to learn like the ins and outs of post production is is another step. Um, like in college, they are offered like reduced or like discounted prices for like post production resources, like certain editing software and things like that. But probably just having more of that and just more and more platforms like your podcast and like publications, things like that that are also, interviewing women of color in this space
Mhm.
can provide, a way to inspire other women of color who would like to enter post production in some sort of capacity.
Mhm, mhm. I think that one of the things that I'm really banking on is that the whole everybody needs to work remote right now thing will open up opportunities for more diverse people to be involved because, like,
Yeah.
not everybody can afford to move to California and
Yeah, true.
like shack up with who knows how many other people in a one-bedroom apartment and waitress a table while you're trying to work a night shift at an editing place or something. Like, it's just crazy what people have to do to make it
Mm,
work in the industry if they're not being bankrolled, by their
right.
parents or something. Um, so
Yeah, that's a very good point.
and then maybe Midwesterners won't have to move to one coast or another.
Yes, that's true. I think that this remote opportunity, in fact, like this whole, you know, revolution of this more digital media in itself has helped out, like, diversify the space just a little bit more. Because at this point, while, obviously New York and California and slowly Atlanta are like they're obviously the hubs of entertainment. You have people who can do vlogs and, record other kinds of content on like their phone, or, get some sort of, GoPro and create like channels that way. And they can also use, that like entry point to also edit their own content.
Mhm.
So I think this emphasis right now, out of necessity, on more remote work can definitely be helpful. And also just like more people having access to ways to create their own content and publish it is also a great way for them to like teach themselves the, the tools of post-production. The only thing is that even with that, you do have to have like a mentor, obviously, to help you get ahead once you start teaching yourself those skills. But like I said, definitely having, you know, a podcast like yours or like other publications, um, and especially right now, a lot of filmmaking groups doing like Zoom workshops or Zoom like chats can also be a good way for people to connect to one another.
Mhm. You mentioned mentors. Do
Yeah.
you have a mentor right now?
Right now, I would probably say, I have like so many people that I sometimes reach out to in terms of questions,
Mhm,
but I would definitely say that the people that I work with, like the colorists I work with at Harbor, have been, pretty helpful in
mhm.
terms of answering my questions about, how they achieve the looks that they make for, certain shows and movies, and also just like general career advice. And also, again, they were pleasant to be around, so that's always a good thing to have in post production.
Yeah, yeah, when we have to work so much together, you better like each other.
Yes.
Um, it's sometimes difficult for us, I feel like, well, that might just be me self-projecting, but, like, a lot of us people in post are introverts and they're awkward and, like, have to really work to make those personal connections, you know what I mean?
Right.
Has that been has I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you identify with that statement?
I would say, what, like, 1 being I don't, and like 10 being I totally do.
I guess 1 being like, yeah, I'm the most social person in the world, and this has never been a problem for me, and 10 being like,
Oh.
I'm a closet, what's that guy in Big Bang Theory? Um, Sheldon Cooper?
Oh, I don't really watch it, so I
Oh, he's super awkward. He's like Spock from Star Trek,
okay.
just really nerdy instead of cool.
Well, I would say that I'm not, like, super extroverted, it's just more out of necessity because I wanna continue to build and grow relationships with people in my industry.
Yeah,
I sort of have to continue to, just, like, talk to people, obviously, and especially is now, I can't obviously set up like a coffee meetup or something, but I can email them, Facebook message them, text them,
mhm,
call them, something like that.
mhm, mhm.
I found that one of the best ways to really, start a conversation is just to talk with someone about, what are they working on? Like, what they find to be inspiring about their project, or, or ask them, what's the funniest thing that's happening during this project? Stuff like that. You don't have to start out having like too deep of a conversation, but just like that sort of entryway that's, you know, obviously relevant to your job is a good way to, I don't know, talk with someone.
Yeah, start kinda shallow, not shallow, but, like, don't try to dive in the deep end the first time probably.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are some of the things that you're looking forward to with Bowman Pictures?
Yeah, one of the things, there's actually a couple of things, especially for this year, although this year's looking pretty wacky, obviously. Or like not even wacky, but very scary.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things would be just getting back to creating my own content again during this time of, everyone staying at home. I've been working on some like several short film scripts, and I don't know exactly when those are going to be produced because, as discussed earlier, we don't really know how, the film industry is going to really look once we can start going out of our homes again. And even once we get to that point, I don't know how filming is going to look, how soon I you can even like start doing something like a short film. But for now, I'm just writing it, getting feedback, and just preparing for the moment where I can get it filmed again.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, so it's like four. I'm My plan is to get like four scripts out, so kind of ambitious. One is a horror short about a little girl who like sees the ghost of her dad, what she thinks is the ghost of her dad. One is about this lady who is house sitting for like her rich friend, and she commits identity fraud. I sort of came up with that one after watching like Parasite and Uncut Gems. If you've ever watched either of those movies,
I'll have to watch them now.
yeah, they're both really good. The third one is it's gonna be about like this woman who is like a famous author and public speaker in the Christian community that's dealing with postpartum depression. The fourth one, I'm still figuring out exactly um, what is exactly going to be, but it's going to be like a weird documentary hybrid. So those are the four um, projects I'm working on right now.
Mhm. And I'm not a writer, so I'm really curious about this. Once you have the script,
Yeah.
do you send it to your friends? Do you send it to like a particular like nonprofit, or like what do you do with that script to take it to the next step?
So yeah, once I get it in a place where I think it's at least decent, I just send it to people that I've worked with before, or I just know very well. Uh, they're usually people that are in film shop, which is the filmmaking community that I mentioned before, and I just get their feedback.
Mhm. And then, so once you got it to a place that you're comfortable with it, what will you do? Do you start casting? Do you just decide, hey, we're gonna do this, like, and find your team? Um,
Yeah. So once the script is in a really good place, I mean, I know for Saturday Grace, that's when I started to schedule out, when I could film it and when it'll be done and when I should start the post production process. It's also when I want to start hiring people or like finding people that can help me hire people. For this for these short projects, I think I'm probably gonna do the same process, but I also have to take into consideration, at least this time around, there will be some good platforms to distribute it on,
mm,
and like sort of making a budget for film festivals. I definitely want to do a lot more planning, this time around.
mhm. Yeah, it can be a trickier process this time. Maybe some new platforms, some new guidelines. When it comes to funding and hiring people, as the business owner, right? Like,
Mhm.
where do you find that funding? Where have you found that funding in the past?
So for my last film, Saturday Grace, a lot of that was a combination of like just because of the amount of like hours I was putting into my full-time job and my freelance job, was able to use funds from that, and also just working with people who were willing to like work at like a discounted rate and like pulling in favors and like offering like my own services to people. It was a lot of sort of that kind of thing to get it done. I
Mhm.
think this time around I will probably want to do the same thing, but also incorporate some sort of crowdfunding that's going to take obviously a little bit more research and planning, but I definitely uh, want to look at alternate ways of funding as well, or maybe even through like different, contests are available out there for scripts or for short films.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I
Hmm.
that's one thing like people think about contests. That was actually how I got started with. I joined this group and there was a film contest. It was make a movie in a month, right? So we didn't have a budget, but what we did, we had to put up $20 to reserve our spot. And when we won, then we got a license to use Adobe Premiere Pro for 2 years. So that's how I've been able to do my stuff without paying for Adobe. I,
Oh,
I wish that Avid
yeah.
would do something like that.
Yeah, that would be really good if they could do that. Help out a lot of people.
Are you in what platform do you edit on?
So a lot of my projects, the freelance ones, they're usually in Premiere. That's a lot of what I noticed a lot of indie filmmakers use,
Mm,
at least the ones that contact me.
mm,
But I have experience like working with Avid just because that's an industry standard,
yeah.
and also using a little bit of DaVinci Resolve. Like I mainly use that as a color grading program, but it does have obviously editing, like an editing portion of it. And sometimes I've had to use that just to make like little shortcuts on
Hmm.
things that I've color graded. Like for Saturday Grace, I had to make a couple of changes after I thought I locked the cut. And at that point, I was color grading in DaVinci Resolve. So I thought, instead of just going back into Premiere and redoing a couple of things, I'll just make a couple of changes in Resolve. And it worked pretty well. So I
Hmm.
would say it's those three things. I used to use Final Cut 7 in college when I was doing like journalism videos for Yale Daily News, but I guess that the Final Cut 7 is not really supported anymore. I
Yeah.
never transitioned really to Final Cut 10.
No. Uh,
Not, I mean, maybe I like briefly used it in college, but I don't really think it was something I really stuck with.
yeah, that's all right. I feel like most people that started on 7 hate 10, which I don't get it because I wasn't around for 7, but I really like 10, but I'm much more happy in Adobe than in Final Cut now. It was a learning curve for sure, but once you get in there, um, yeah. But anyways, is there any advice that you would have for, women who are just starting out or maybe want to advance their career more right now?
Oh, okay. So if they're just starting out, some of my advice would be there's like so many resources on YouTube, but I would definitely pick those resources wisely because not there are some people who are just more capable of talking about editing than others. I mean, I definitely know that DaVinci Resolve has training videos and like training um, resources. You can download that for free. So that's obviously going to these different websites and seeing like the free training videos that they have. That's great. I think Avid, they have Media Composer first, and that's sort of like a beginning free version of that. Um, if this person who's starting out is still in college or in school or something, they can get a discounted version of some of these programs. Like I know Adobe obviously offers that. And just like keep watching a lot of movies and taking notes
Mhm.
in terms of, watch a brand new movie and just like jot down things that you really caught your eye, or revisit a movie that you definitely love and just make notes of what are like some really impactful cuts or like storytelling techniques that you notice, and always like sit and watch like the end credits. People I think there's this weird thing now where, like, because of Marvel movies, I think people sometimes want to watch credits a little bit more
Yeah.
because they think there's going to be some, I don't know, extra footage or whatever. But watch the end credits anyway, just to see who was involved in creating a movie, especially out of like respect of all the people who are creating the movie, but also just seeing the different artists in post production, like seeing the editor, the assistant editor, the colorist, the finishing house, and I don't know, just like checking out the IMDb page or the website of those people and seeing what sort of cool stuff that they've done in other places. I know that I was in another like Zoom chat, and someone said this is probably like the best time to reach out to people on social media because everyone's at home. It's
Mhm.
like if someone, especially like um, like smaller filmmakers that you see on Vimeo or YouTube, if you really like their stuff, just like reach out to them and say, hey, how did you make this, and who were your like um, who's your post production team, or like reach out to like the colorist or editor or sound mixer, whoever worked on those films that you see, and like just you know
Mhm.
try to ask them some questions. In terms of people who want to get ahead, I mean, I'm sort of in that position right now of wanting to do that. One of the things that I'm trying to do is just continue to build my skill set. So I obviously already use like Avid and Adobe and DaVinci Resolve, but I'm going back to their websites and like learning like more shortcuts, more features that maybe I don't use as regularly. And I'm also going and seeing like these short films online that are by like other independent filmmakers who obviously aren't like super famous, but they're still like up and coming in their field. And I'm being inspired by that. And I'm reaching out to them saying, hey, how did you pull this off? What sort of advice do you have? It's just a combination of building your skill set and just studying how films are made. And of course, reaching out to people. Reaching out to people is number one.
Mhm. Mhm. I think it's easy for people to think like, oh, yeah, I can't talk to this person. They produce this excellent thing, and I'm so like shy to say hello. But people want that. Like they
Yeah.
want to know that somebody appreciated what they spent so much time and effort building, right?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you approach them with respect, and it always helps to have like a really, not like a super detailed question, but like try to come up with a question that's like kind of specific and not just like sort of like basic, or like show that you've done some sort of research.
Yeah.
And I found that like people really respect that. Like
Yeah.
you're actually paying attention to their craft.
Don't just fangirl them. Be like, right.
Right.
Cool. All right. Is there anything else that oh, you know what? I wanted to ask you about how faith influences your work and if because I feel like our field is often like people always talk about media and people who are making movies as like this big secular like amalgamation, but that's
Right.
like we're diverse. We're diverse group. Like there's people of all kinds of faiths. So how does your faith influence the work that you do?
So I was raised in a non-denominational household. I mean, I guess it's technically Protestant. Um, so a lot of my, faith outlook is influenced by that. I was a part of a faith group in college, and I obviously go to church. I mean, I don't go physically because of
Right now.
obviously COVID-19.
Mhm.
I still like attend you know, when it streams online. But that sort of like upbringing and outlook has sort of influenced what I make in terms of I really want to, and I strive to create movies that show how faith plays out realistically in a person's life. Like I am not trying to make something that is totally 100%, perfect. Everyone's happy and they pray and instantly all their problems are have vanished. But I'm also not trying to, you know, create a movie where, oh, if someone's religious or something, I'm making fun of them. I don't really do that. It's more of a, showing someone realistically dealing with the issues in their life and how faith sort of interacts with that.
Mm.
So when I was creating Lean on Him as a college senior, that was about a woman, a Christian woman, having a crisis of faith when her mom develops dementia. And I wanted to show how, she struggles with believing in God when her mom's going through this, and also how there is a church community there to support her. So it's a lot of complicated material. And the ending is obviously ambiguous because the mom isn't miraculously healed or anything. It's something that the daughter's just going to have to deal with. For Saturday Grace, I wanted something a little bit more optimistic, but I didn't want it to be like too cheesy. So it's about a woman who she loses her husband. She's obviously depressed, and she encounters this homeless woman in a park. They sort of have a hostile meeting, but they both realize that, hey, we both love dance. Dance is something that makes us feel alive, and they become friends. And through that, the homeless woman, she has someone who can, help her out. And the woman who is grieving, she is able to rediscover her passion for worship dancing. And, it is obviously happier than Lean on Him, but I wanted to show that, these two people obviously clash. The homeless woman isn't like some magical, like, homeless person in a park. She's definitely like a tough person who's been through a lot.
Hmm.
But I wanted to also blend that with just like a lot of like cool visuals in terms of like dancing and what it means to both of them. So I would say that's how faith sort of has impacted like my first two short films. It also means that I try not to like go and like work on movies that are like super explicit,
Mm.
at least like as a for my freelancing company. So if something's like super violent or like it seems like really disrespectful to a certain group of people, I'm like, I don't really want to do that. But there are other works that I've been very happy to work on, like, and it was like a great music video that I worked on, which was about this woman who, befriends like this really stressed out like corporate guy, and they at the end they're like dancing at this cool jazz festival. And there was another short film that I worked on that was about, this woman who is raising this girl in like foster care, and it's not like a negative foster care story. It's a happy one. So it's like I work on things that, aren't super explicit or disrespectful, something that can contribute something. It doesn't have to be super optimistic, but something meaningful and not demeaning. And also, of course, something that it has that has diverse storytelling, because I care a lot about depicting women of color, especially women of color, in their faith in complex ways. You see that in my two short films, and you will also see that in like some of the other short films that I've edited and color graded. But usually, even if it doesn't have the faith angle, then it still has like a woman of color, being an actual human being and not a caricature.
Right, right. Yeah, I feel like that's changed a lot over the past several years even, just seeing women as more like true to actual people rather than like what somebody in Hollywood thinks about women, you know?
Oh yeah, I'm so glad to see more of that.
Yeah. Okay, well,
Mhm.
is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we kind of wrap things up?
Um, I I mean, I don't know if you wanted to like ask any direct questions about Saturday Grace or like the clip that I sent to you
I plan on
or
kind of
anything like that.
putting the clip like in let's here, I'll share the screen and we'll just give it a quick because it's not long even.
Oh yeah, it's only 30 seconds.
When I dance, everything just melts away. But you can't escape forever, right?
Used to dance on a stage every night. You gotta focus on that inner spark. You wanna keep that close. You lose that, you die. I'm alive. So are you.
In that particular selection, when Ayana is talking about when she dances, everything melts away, and then Lila's saying, you gotta remember that feeling that helps you stay alive. That particular part is like the strongest emotional part of the story. So, and it's a cool visual contrast between like the black and white of the flashback of her dancing in church and also the beautiful color of the park, which is taking place in the present day. So those are sort of the two reasons why I chose that particular 30-minute section for this podcast. I did have to shorten it a little bit just so that it would fit in like the 30-second time limit. But I guess that goes to show you that you're never really done editing, because as I was watching the film again, there was definitely parts where I thought could have been longer, could have been shorter, but after a while, you just have to step back and say, all right, this is done. I can't keep, or rather, I shouldn't keep spending a lot of time on this because I have to, present this to the world, obviously in the best way possible, but I can't spend forever on it or else no one will ever see it.
Right. I like how, and now that you bring it up, I like how her flashback is in black and white, and then she shows her, the old woman shows her the picture, and the picture is in black and white. I think that's significant. It's like the parallel visually. Right.
Yeah, it's supposed to be, that picture is like the old woman's flashback to, when she was obviously, famous, dancing on Broadway. I mean, it's not explicit, but that's the implication.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was wonderfully done. Thank you. And it will include a link to the full video. It's like 6 minutes long, right?
Yeah, it's like 7 minutes.
Yeah, so if you want to check out the full video, check out the link below, and get a bigger picture of the whole scene. Because the old woman is very feisty. There was a couple of moments she really surprised me.
Yeah, I was definitely not. I didn't want her to be a sentimental character.
Yeah, it was well done. All right. Well, Patrice, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your experience and your thoughts on film. And hope you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, and again, thank you very much, Kristen, for this great opportunity. And I had a lot of fun.
Thank you.